Good morning, ma'am. Am I audible?
Good morning, Vivek. Yes, you are audible. And can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
ठीक है ठीक सो कुछ पार्टिसिपेंट्स है ना ज्वाइन नहीं हो रहा मैं वही चेक कर रही थी उनको हेल्प कर रही थी नियति जिज्ञासु से भी नहीं हो रहा था वो कह रही समथिंग इज स्टक अप
मैम
सो
उन्होंने फिर वेबएक्स ऐप डाउनलोड नहीं किया होगा।
नहीं नहीं डाउनलोड तो मैंने भी किया था बट ये मैं ब्राउजर से अभी कर रही हूँ क्योंकि ये उस पे गया नहीं अपने आप सो आई लेट मी चेक विद हर आल्सो
Okay.
ठीक है।
Shall we start, ma'am? Or we take 2 minutes?
Yes, yes. Vivek, we should start. Rather, I cannot see Manet over here. They are just showing, it is just showing three panelists.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was wondering, he's saying that he has joined, but he's not visible over here.
Okay.
So can you just check and let me know, and then please start.
Okay, ma'am. A very good morning to all the respected dignitaries, panelists, and participants. On behalf of NIDM, I Vivek Sharma, Young Professional Cultural Heritage DRR, welcome you all to this webinar program on preparing museums for disaster risk reduction, organized by National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India in collaboration with Heritage Preservation Atelier HPA. This aims to start a dialogue regarding responsibilities of museum in disaster risk reduction and share some case studies within Indian museums. To create awareness regarding disaster risk preparedness among the staff and public associated with the museums, and to provide a basic outline of the ways in which museums and its staff can equip themselves for disaster risk reduction. Let us begin with the inaugural session. Firstly, I would like to introduce the program chairperson of this webinar, Shri Tajasan, IPS Executive Director, NIDM. Shri Tajasan sir is presently working as a Director General, Fire Services, Civil Defense and Home Guards, and also holding the additional charge of Executive Director, NIDM. Now it would be my honor to introduce the convener of this webinar, Professor Santosh Kumar, Head GIDRR, National Institute of Disaster Management. Being a disaster risk reduction, policy planning, and capacity development expert, he has 35 years of experience in different positions in the development, planning, and DRR sector. A PhD in economics, he studied gender and development in IDX, Sussex, UK, and received professional training in disaster risk management from Israel. Backed with international work exposure at the World Bank and inter-governmental body of SAC. Now I would like to request Ms. Namita Jaspal, ma'am, Director HPA, to carry forward the webinar. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you so much for this introduction. And very good morning to all the participants. And I would, first of all, Vivek, I would like to check because Dr. Purohit, who will be giving the special address after
Yes.
this, he is saying that he has some problems. He cannot, things are not audible to him. So if you can just check the system, and even Manat's email ID is not being taken up uh, by the system. So he's not in the panelists. So he's not able to join as such.
Okay, ma'am.
So if you can just check these two things, and then we'll move forward.
Ma'am, now Rohit,
Yes,
Rajesh Purohit sir can speak.
yes. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir. Ye Sir, now you speak.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
And regarding my PPT, how will I operate it from here? Because the share content is not working.
I will share the sharing rights.
Okay, so
I will give you the sharing rights.
I can use my keypad from here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. That's okay.
Um, just a minute. I'll just check the things and so good morning, everyone. And we are pleased to introduce you to the two main special addresses. First one is by Dr. Rajesh Purohit. Dr. Rajesh Purohit is the former director of Indian Museum, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, and he is professionally trained field archaeologist from the Institute of Archaeology, Archaeological Survey of India. He has 32 years of professional experience in the government and quasi-government organizations. His field interest has been on heritage management, undertaking archaeological explorations and excavations as a field archaeologist, conservation of built heritage and museum antiquities, curating major exhibitions and interpreting artifacts, and undertaking scientific research in art, archaeology, museology. He has authored and edited books and catalogs on Indian art and culture, mythology, especially on the pilgrimage sites, sacred landscapes, and most importantly, he has been credited with setting up of museums, different types of museums such as art and archaeological museums, theme and personalia museums, digital galleries such as storytelling exhibitions. He has also contributed significantly in developing projects, museum for tourism promotion, in the state of Haryana. He was heading the Indian Museum Kolkata and Allahabad Museum Prayagraj, two museums of national importance under Ministry of Culture, Government of India, as director for 10 years. Being the director of North Central Zone Cultural Center, consisting of 7 states of India, has demonstrated the ability to organizing mega cultural events, management of large gatherings during the Mahakumbh Mela, cultural events, management of large gatherings of Mahakumbh Mela. I'm sorry, I repeated this thing. Being the director in 2 museums of national importance, has an experience of training museum professionals of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and the curators of site museums of Archaeological Survey of India. He has participated in the Museum Leadership Training Program in 6 months course organized in collaboration with British Museum London, represented Ministry of Culture, Government of India as an observer for the Vivekanand Museum Excellence Fellowship program held at the Art Institute of Chicago, the USA. He was as one among 11 global museum leaders by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, to attend Global Museum Leaders Colloquium in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. Also represented India in the World Conferences for the Conservation of World Civilizations at Beijing, the Republic of China. Now, now over to Dr. Rajesh Purohit. Thank you so much, sir, for joining in today.
Talking on the topic, as I have already given you the PowerPoint presentation. Can I see my PowerPoint presentation here, or should I share it?
Sir, I have already given you a sharing rights. You can share
Okay.
your PPT.
Okay. Now is it visible to all of you?
Yes, sir. In full
Okay.
screen mode.
Okay. So now let us go to the presentation. The title of my presentation is SOS Call for Museum Professionals, Save the Cultural Properties Before It is Lost in the Oblivion. And this is a disaster management guidelines for most of the curators and the museum professionals across the country. And this is purely based on the templates that has been prepared by the International Council of Museum, as well as my personal experience being the head of the institution for 2 of the national museums, And I'll be sharing my case study and the problem which I had encountered during the entire service of mine. And this will also give you an insight about the present state of affairs in the museums of India, especially the museums under the control of the Ministry of Culture in particular. So first of all, there is something called history repeats itself, and very often we ignore and hardly learn any experience which history has given us in the recent times. You might have heard about the colossal disaster that had happened with the National Museum of Natural History and Archaeology, that is Rio de Janeiro's Brazil Museum. And the Brazil National Museum disaster is a landmark in the entire history of museum, especially with regard to the issue concerning the safeguarding of the properties. And you might have also come across with the fact that how it was an irreparable loss, not only for the Brazilian science, but the world. The building can be reconstructed, restored, and everything else, but the collection can never be replaced. This is what the former director of the museum said immediately after the colossal disaster that had happened. 2 centuries of science and culture are lost forever. So if the problem is that in many of the countries, and especially countries like India, we have seen that we don't learn anything from our history, because a similar museum in the heart of the capital of the country in New Delhi had happened when the National Museum of Natural History got destroyed because of the fire that had taken place. I mean, say about 4 or 5 years back. So we have seen that most of the problems that we have with regard to the loss of the cultural property, especially which are kept in the museum, are either we do not follow the templates or the guidelines which are given to us by the disaster management national disaster management authorities. Because I remember every month we used to send a document to the ministry citing that everything is okay in my premises, in my museum, that no loss, no such incident had taken place. But simply giving a monthly report is not enough. Adhering to the principles of risk management and the disaster management ethics, if we don't, as a professional, do not follow honestly, and I mean deliberately we ignore all these things. Because very often if you visit any of the museums, I don't say about the National Museum Delhi, which is one of the finest museums in the country, where all kinds of facilities are there with regard to the fire safety and others. But I'm not, without naming any of the museums, I'm giving you whatever experience I had. I remember long time back when I joined one of the museums in 2011. I was asked by the government to open up a gallery, open up the chamber where 3,000 antiquities for long 10 years were kept locked. Can you imagine in a country like India, a Group C employee could bother to shield that room and no authority could do anything to that person, and 3,000 antiquities, the antiquities ranging from the Mohenjo-daro grave goods to the Second World War, First World War, rarest weapons, those weapons hardly have anybody has seen, and these were locked inside a room and nobody could dare to open it for 10 long years. But it was a Herculean task for me when the board of governors asked the new director will open this, taking all risk and all that. But they constituted a committee through which I got the support of the local police and a magistrate, and it was just like a war. We had to, we have an entire recording of all these things. And eventually we could manage to open those 3,000 and retrieve those antiquities. And those antiquities were catalogued and they were cleaned, and many of the organic materials were destroyed, and somehow we could rescue all those artifacts, which is a historic event in my life with regard to disaster management. And immediately after that, I had to face a court case because the person who had locked it lodged an FIR, false FIR, and I have been suffering for that reason for years together. Here, neither the ministry nor the people nor anybody would come to rescue to you when such court cases are lodged against you. You will have to fight your own battle. This is what is a experience for all those people. I'm warning those people. I'm educating these people that in the long run, when they will be running this museum, they are going to face these kind of situations. And it only happens in India. Nowhere in the world this could happen. But problem is that why a person would take such kind of risk of his own life and the life of the family. But being a responsible museum professionals, it is your duty, it is your responsibility to retrieve and safeguard those artifacts. Similarly, in one of the other museums which I had worked, I don't want
Excuse
to
me,
name
sir.
them. Yes.
Sir, you have to put it on a full screen mode, the presentation mode, the presentation.
Okay. Is it not
Just at the,
visible?
it is
Okay.
visible, but not in the, on the
Okay.
screen mode.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
from here.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. That's better. Thank you.
Okay. So this is how in another experience of mine with regard to disaster management, because in India, most of the museums are vulnerable to fire. Their location itself, excepting museum like Salarjung Museum, where have all facilities, even a fire brigade office and vehicle and everything is attached to the museum. They have done a wonderful thing in that museum. Or say, for example, Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum, where they have adequate facilities. Or say, for example, National Museum, where they have given the responsibility to the CPWD, which is looking after the institution with regard to disaster management. But what happened to other museums is of utter surprise. You'll be, if NIDM can do a survey, I urge the people of NIDM to do a survey of the museums with regard to, suddenly they will have to go there and see whether the fire safety or antiquity safety or the art object risk management, all these things are maintained or not. If it is not, then you'll have to fall into crisis, and these crises are so, I mean, harmful that one day you will find another incident like the Brazil National Museum's incident can take place, which will perish the 200 years or the thousands of years, 200 years collections, or 75 year or 90 years collections, or the 5,000-year-old civilizational collection that you have. You will find them, it is lost. And that is why I'm very much thankful to the organization NIDM under the Ministry of Home. They have taken this initiative to educate the people and how they can safeguard their antiquities. And they will also have to see that how these curators and the directors are saved from the crisis like the court cases and other things, so that they at least do not suffer from all these kinds of things, which the, I mean, after a survey they can produce it before the ministry for the remedy or the mitigation of these problems. So now, if you go back to the Brazil Museum case, you might have seen that the museum had no sprinkler system and limited water was available in the fire hydrant. In one of the museums where I have worked, 200 crore were given to the organization, to the museum, for the modernization. And the CAG report of 2021, which was tabled before the parliament, would reveal you. Please go through the report, where you will find that how the fire hydrant were not installed immediately after destroying the existing fire hydrant. Until date, no such facilities are available whereby the fire can be checked. In spite of the fact, a fire audit with an accurate data of the entire premises with the drawings, 3D drawings, and each inch and square inches of area are covered, so that a proper disaster management policy can be adopted in the museum. But I do not have any idea what happened immediately after I was transferred from the museum, after the disclosure of all the lapses which had taken place with regard to the 200 years, 200 crore rupees. And the CAG has pointed out all those things which you must go through, so that we learn a lesson from all these things, and what we also learn what is happening in our country with regard to the safety and security of the art objects, and what happened to the people who try to save their motherland's cultural property, and how their life go through after that. So a disaster is an emergency situation, and but with regard to the cultural property, I'm telling you, other than the fire, water, thunder, and all this, the basic problem is that every day the organic object, even the inorganic object, every day which are kept in the store are slowly dying. And there is another example of the man-made disaster that is happening across the country, which I'll be explaining you, and how these things are harmful. So the state of affairs of museum storage is, I mean, alarmingly bad. I'm so sorry to let you know that if you see any of the museums, any good museums of the world, you will not find the kind of storage system that they have, the kind of scientific storage system that they have. In spite of getting crores of rupees fund from the ministry, the museums are not able to develop a good storage system. And whenever any effort is made, the curators or the curatorial associates who are working, they are not acclimatized to store them properly. They are not educated properly to store them. And the most important loss that take place, the disaster that take place, is the handling of the objects. And another issue is inadequate trained staff. Conservation labs, proper labs are not there. The administrative level failure is very much there. Improper budgeting, fund allocation for storage, security, and all these things are very poor. And poor vigilance. There is no vigilance what is going on inside the museum with regard to the art objects. That is entirely because of the lesser number of staff, inadequate staff that you have. No check and balance, and most importantly, there is no accountability. So I'm straight away going to the question that why should we preserve our heritage? When we talk about the disaster management, why should we bother about our heritage? It protects, safeguards world's cultural and natural heritage, both within museums and more generally. Support, provide learning opportunities in support of the SDGs, and that is sustainable development and growth. Enable cultural participation for all, support sustainable tourism, enable research in the support of sustainable development growth, direct internal leadership management and operational to support SDG. The direct external leadership and collaboration and partnership towards SDGs. So these are the reasons why we should go for protecting the heritage. The museum as such is the custodian, has incomparable places of discovery. They teach us about our civilization cultures, open our mind to new ideas, explores the potential of the museum, bring about three positive. This is what the theme of this year's International Council of Museums, which aimed at. And the three lenses are entirely based on the objects, the theme, the time, the space, the history, and the happenings. And the three lenses are the power of achieving sustainability, the power of innovating digitization and accessibility, the power of community building through education. And the responsibilities of the museum in disaster reduction is why we should do it. We should ask all these things to ourselves. Why should we do this? who should do it, when it should do, how it should do, and where it should do. So awareness of building issue is a very important issue. Maintenance and regular upkeeping is required. The importance of training is required. Availability of adequate emergency equipment in appropriate locations. And the threats collection are faced due to the variety of regions, and the regions mostly these factors, the preventive conservation, are very important when developing a disaster risk plan, especially when conducting a risk assessment. Early disaster risk management scholarship stressed the importance of identifying risk ways to categorize and theorize the severity of this threat to the collections. The risk collections regarding the physical forces like earthquake, high wind, winds, etc. Then you have fire, the electric fault, and lightning. Fire is a very important short circuiting due to the AC, the air conditionings, which are very badly installed in many of the museums, because many of the museums do not have an air conditioning plant. They have made only a makeshift arrangement of uh, smaller ACs, which are very, very vulnerable and for short circuiting and all these things. And most importantly, you don't have trained, skilled electricians. The most laughable thing is that you don't have a permanent skilled engineer to look after such huge museums. Then the water like flood and roof leaks, rising of the dam, and this is due to the dampness. Many of the gallery artifacts, due to osmosis process, the water sucked into the sandstone objects or stone or iron object or metal object and get rusting and getting decomposed. The criminal activities like theft and vandalism. Vandalism is one of the key issues which is connected with the museum. The example which I have given you, the mishandling of the national symbol, which is the lion capital, was handled by ordinary laborers to lift such a colossal heavyweight object, and eventually it was damaged, and it is one of the colossal disasters that had taken place in the history of music in India. Then the you paste and is a common things, because you will find there are eateries all around the museums. I don't want to name the museums. I tried my best to remove those eateries, but as long as I was there, I could do that. But I earned a bad name for and the most important vandalism is caused by the attendants, the gallery attendants, who often you will not find them there sitting in the gallery. And if you raise any objection, they will go for an outcry, and they will defame you. They will go for placarding, sloganeering, and do strike, and the ministry will immediately change the X or Y director from their place, because the director is not capable of handling these people in a foreign land. So, I mean, these are the risk collections which you might have seen: the costly and negligent, poor handling of the storage, then the pollutants, all these things are there. Then the hazard or cause of the unwanted event, chance of likelihood of threat, unwanted event happening, risk management, identification, assessment, and prioritization of the risk, and the risk assessment, calculating an object view of the magnitude of the risk to the collection.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, I will conclude with this slide.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Controlling risk museum, the environmental management is crucial, and the central focal point is the people's collections of the building information, the security, the collections care, the housekeeping, the organizational culture, the conservation, documentation, and the pest management. If you could manage this thing, I'm sure most of your issue will be solved. The best thing is the disaster preparedness plan, disaster mitigation plan, disaster recovery plan, and disaster recovery, salvage and rehabilitation. These are the key issues which you will have to address, especially the museum building survey, which is a necessary, and handling of the objects. I'm just showing the slides that how these things are useful while shifting the objects, handling the object for display, how equipment are to be required, what kinds of equipment, then everything must be documented. Then the storage furniture plays a very significant role because they protect the object from the macro and microclimate um, conditioning of the, and the housekeeping and security, of course, are there. And then the last but not the least, you need to educate and train these people so that and there is a clear-cut course which are to be imparted, the course training to be imparted, and this is called integrated emergency management, and this management course is required for all the museum professionals. With these words, whatever experience I had with regard to the problems that we had faced in our life, and I would look forward to see India, where Indian museums, most of our museums are, I mean, adhere to the principles of disaster management guidelines, and hopefully we will see one day that our people are educated enough to say the wonderful antiquities and culture that we have in this country, especially the government, present government, which is very keenly taking interest for the first time for the upheaval and the development of consciousness in the mind of the people of India with regard to the great heritage of this wonderful country, India. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful time.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for your enriching presentation. Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Hanji, thank you so much, sir, for your enriching presentation and your sharing your experiences with us. So I'm Manit Jaspal, and I'm a conservator with HPA. And I would like to introduce a second special address by Dr. Banani Bhattacharya. So, Dr. Banani Bhattacharya is working as Deputy Director in the Department of Archaeology and Museums in Haryana since 2015. She has a major thirst of interest in the field of archaeology. She has obtained her MA from Archaeology Department, University of Calcutta, and PhD from Visva Bharati Shantiniketan. She has contributed many articles in different journals and books of national and international repute. She has done different excavations, especially in West Bengal, Haryana, and Madhya Pradesh. She was also awarded 3 times for the best paper in archaeology section in different annual sessions of Indian History Congress. She is also a winner in WAC, World Archaeological Congress, student ethic debate held in Rome. So I would like to welcome Dr. Banani Bhattacharya. Over to you, ma'am. Yes, yes, you're audible, ma'am.
So I want to thank and express my gratitude to Central Institute of Disaster Management, Government of India, and Heritage Preservation for this opportunity. And it's my title of my this lecture is Key Aspects of Museum Risk Reduction Strategies. Please. Museums play a key role in supporting people, communities, the society, and nature, prevent or mitigate risk for cultural heritage in the wider world. Making a difference in the world is arguably the best for museums as organizations. Risk management for museums is a process in which individuals and organizations to protect their property and for risk and museum for all such events or factors may adversely
Excuse me, ma'am, your voice is not clear.
is it clear now? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes, that's better.
better. Now you're
Okay.
audible.
Okay. Then risk management is a key role that can be tackled with a balanced approach between available resources, manpower, and the environment and natural factors, as the risk can be natural or man-made processes. Next slide. In museum visiting, it's mainly location, participating in marketing, advertising, signages, time and transport available to reach the museum, range of the interest in the museum's collections, etc. Many museums already consider disaster or risk management essential aspects in terms of protecting their own buildings and collections. Museum activities are quite fragmented and diverse. Each activity of the museum represents a relative complex of individual tasks and duties. So the museum and especially its repository is very similar to a warehouse, and many museum technologies are also reminiscent of logistic systems. In particular, the storage of a collection and its registration and preservation is very similar to the logistic storage of collections. Only difference being many items of collections are not handled. Any movement or change of location must be reported immediately. Or handling improper. This is the very crucial point in all of our museum staffs. All museum collections are subject to risk that affect its land and value. Risk management requires a process with a clear purpose, reliable, well-designed activities, and value-added outputs. Risk management has the task of identifying, measuring the probability and the impact of events and treating risk as eliminating minimum investment of resources. Key elements of risk management program mainly process, integration, culture, and methodology should initially provide a risk assessment. It creates a tool to manage implementation of collection security measures. The aim is to limit damage to the group. The most common risks of museum collections, which are physical forces, depend on earthquakes, physical damage from handling, vibration from circuits, repair, fire, flame, it's an example of Bunny and Buddha also. Then water, plumb, roof leaks. Again, it's a very good example of for the Indian Museum Kolkata. Vandalism. The most key point in these days, actually, lots of material or artifacts are saved by the people. Department must be aware of that. And the next one is the pest. Because of rodents or insects, and Haryana, it's very much affected by these pests, basically for termites. Then pollutants, light and ultraviolet radiation, temperature fluctuations, incorrect relative humidity of administration because of due to loss of data, products, etc. So at our department, that is the Department of Haryana Archaeology, has initiated 3 prime projects with the State Archaeological Museum. It's in the Panchkula. Of as iconic site, one iconic site in India. Then construction of site museum Kundal, which is in pre constructed and it's constructed Kurukshetra, and it's the CM announcement. It's to be created. It's a huge collection collected by the department is concentrating on the checking of risk regularly that ends with the damage. Confront with the at work in museums has social, environmental, technological, security issues, and economic, cultural, and social political implications. So the risk migration mitigate, then support the realization of the set goals triggered by the work. The definition suggests a state of anticipation of a state of uncertainty associated with the of risk in museums. So therefore, museums need to prevent and force so as not to disrupt their performance of the museum's core functions. In this context, we are trying to monitor 2 main risk parameters. One, probability of risk occurrence, and second one is the effect of the risk involved. Identification of risks and their factors that could harm the health and safety and property environment where we understand this risk. So risk management in museums of Haryana is insufficient and is not even implemented in several places. The presented issue of risk management in museum is only the first introduction of these knowledge to museums. The department has begun work with museums to be constructed in international level and develop research and manual for risk management in museums. Due to the lack of awareness of culture in state, the implementation of the risk system in practice is slow, but as national or international bodies require such approaches to the global political situation and climate threats. The great diversity of the structure of a site has a of government management, storage, and collection management.
Ma'am, really sorry to interrupt, but your voice is breaking.
Emergencies. It's, I think, due to the network.
Yeah.
Am I
Your voice is breaking. It's
sorry. Such events have appeared in full force over years and have destroyed much of irreplaceable heritage without any prior signal. So the introduction of risk management as part of an integrated museum management system is essential, as emergencies and disasters are democratic and unexpectedly affect all countries globally and thus its various institutions. The society vulnerability of collections and therefore in cooperation with politicians, decision makers and global institutions support the issue of risk management as well as its subsets of the global disaster risk reduction strategies. So these essential aspects function of heritage body and management can protect and for future generations. We show the guideline of the disaster management for all the museums. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your informative presentation. So now in our technical session, our first speaker is Ms. Nayati Jigyasu. So let me introduce her. Ms. Nayati Jigyasu is an architect and an academic with more than 22 years of experience at various institutions. So she has taught the subject of disaster risk management at Chandigarh College of Architecture and the master's degree course at UNESCO Category 2 Center, WWI, which is the World Wildlife Institution, Dehradun. Nayati has also worked on risk assessment projects, including Chandigarh Museum and Art Gallery in Chandigarh, under DRONA funded by Getty Foundation, USA. She has also been involved in academic exercises for assessing risk at various heritage sites in Chandigarh. She has presented her work at various national and international conferences and journals. She has been a selected participant in the international course on people-centered approach at ICROM, Rome, in October 2017. She has also been a resource person for the sub-regional inception work linking World Heritage Sites and local cultural assets through museums, information centers, and creative industries, held in Malaysia in 2018. She is a member of ICOMOS India, INTAC, ACHS, and the Council of Architecture India. She is the coordinator for the National Scientific Committee of Historical Cities, Towns, and Villages, which is NSC-HCTV, and has been working on various research projects in the capacity of coordinator for the NSC-HCTV since June 21. She is currently completing her doctoral research in the subject of urban conservation. So over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So yeah, I have been more of an academic, and but during that career of my academic, I have been into a lot of exercises where we have done different buildings, including a bank square, which is an urban space in Chandigarh, as well as all the majority buildings of the Punjab University. In fact, we when one of a team of my students, when we worked on the Punjab University, the biggest threat that we found was with the administrative building, and that was also put up to the Vice Chancellor at that time, and it just happened that in 6 months the fire actually happened, and a lot of problem was there with the records, because when you look at even these kind of university buildings also, they also have many things which are very valuable, and they need to be looked at, and the risk have to be checked beforehand. So, and this is one project that I had last worked on for the Government Museum and Art Gallery, Chandigarh, where we have done the assessment of the disaster risk in this museum, and we are, I think, hopefully in the next year there will be more work, which the work will start on the mitigation part of it. So the idea of this presentation was basically to talk about the site challenges and issues. So trying to use that case study, because as far as museums are concerned, or for that many of the heritage buildings or components are concerned, one size doesn't fit all. So though there are guidelines, systems in place, which I will talk about here also, there are certain characteristics of the site in itself which need to be addressed and which can actually be make the artifacts at risk, get the building at risk, and need to be addressed at regular intervals. So I think we are all aware of many events, which on and off it does happen with the museum. And as we see here, it was the issue was more about the inoperable, operable pumps. So I think there are most of the museums are doing a good job, and there are a lot of systems in place. But sometimes there are issues which happen at the ground level, which needs to be addressed and which needs to be looked into continuously over the years. Also, when it comes to museums, the kind of risk is very different compared to any other, heritage buildings or any other buildings that we look at. Because here, the risk can be, just a 3-4 centimeters small, rise or something, artifact or something, or it can be something bigger also. So it is a very different way how it needs to be handled as far as the typology is concerned. This actually comes from Whitney, the museum, which I think has started in the last 2 years. And they have, after the museum was already in construction, they actually realized that, they might need to look at a lot of these natural hazards which are happening on that area. And the only point which I'm trying to put down here is that the thing that it talks about, that the cost is only 10 million more compared to the entire 220 million project. So most of the times the disaster mitigation strategies are not so expensive. It's only the question of addressing at the right moment. The idea of museums is basically to they have to build their own resilience and reduce the impact of disasters on museums themselves. But at the same time, it's also to help the museums contribute to the resilient building in the wider world for the benefit of the society as well as natural environment. We already know the disaster management cycle, so where we basically look at preparedness and crisis management. So before the disaster, during the disaster, and after the disaster. And it's very important that, we are well versed with the preparedness, and that is what basically the assessment of risk is all about. That the better the preparedness, better is going to be the response at the time of crisis management, and better will be the recovery situation. Preparedness. So basically, this methodology of risk assessment in this museum was basically divided into risk assessment, and then there were also policies as well as strategies and guidelines which are put forward for the mitigation of the same. And most of the time in disaster management, in terms of buildings, we always talk about the human lives first. Here, when we talk about museums, we also need to understand that the question is not only about saving the human life, which of course comes first, but there is also these artifacts which have a lot of value in terms of their history, in terms of their associations, in terms of various characteristics. And at the same time, buildings like the case study that I'm going to talk about, the building in itself is actually an artifact because of its historical association with particular architecture and the period when it was built. So condition assessment was first done, which actually looked at conditions of various types of collections kept in various displays and storage unit areas, and identifying the key agents of deterioration and underlying causes. And this led to the site assessment, where we looked at the site observations, interviews, evaluation of existing management systems by understanding the existing organization structure, the assessment of existing roles and responsibility and procedures. The Chandigarh Museum, which is basically, it's a government museum and art gallery as it is called, was there was a conservation management project which was actually begun in 2018. And this project actually comes under the Keeping It Modern grant awarded by the Getty Foundation. And the project principal consultants were Drona, and we were consultants for the risk assessment. Something a little bit on the building, basically because of, as I mentioned, that this building itself is also very important because of one, it's a Grade 1 heritage building. It is part of the Le Corbusier's concern for juxtaposing of pure form. So it is part of the 3 buildings that, museums that Corbusier worked on, basically. So we had one in Japan, one is in Ahmedabad, and this is the 3rd one. So it's a trilogy and it's important landmark in that way. The museum also shows significance as an exemplary contribution to modernism in its search for one, with the idea of museum as a machine. And Corbusier also talked about limitlessness of a museum. So where he talks about the way a museum should be, articulated and how the circulation should be worked out within that. And this is one example of his concepts. The risk to the GMAC buildings basically were assessed in, one was assessing the existing conditions and risk to collections. And second is identifying and analyzing the typology of risk and vulnerability factors to each type of collections based on its display, storage, locations, surroundings, building conditions, etc. So this will help in identifying the building area and collections with the highest amount of risk. The first was we made a list of, one was, of course, the areas which are there. Second was we talked about the collections. And third is the type of collections which are here. So you have sculptures, textiles, paintings. This museum is very important for its Gandhara sculptures and many miniature paintings and coins and many other things, including. This was each artifact was taken separately and it was detailed out in terms of its exhibit details, where it has been displayed, what is the type of display, the physical condition of the room, existing management systems, what are the potential threat to it, what is the vulnerable characteristics that it has, or the area around it, or whether it's a display system that we are looking at. And this entire exercise was taken up for this museum, and I'm going to just point out some of the key issues which we realized. Now, when you look at hazard, it's also very important to see what kind of hazard we are looking at, because you have constant, which is like weathering, erosion, or insect attack, which can be slow and progressive. And there can be sporadic, like rainfall, which is immediate also and progressive also, because it happens over the time also. And there are also rare ones like earthquake, which has a very immediate effects. And considering that Chandigarh is already on the earthquake zone, it needs to address these concerns also. The results which happen because of the risk is it can be catastrophic, or it can be cumulative, or it can be slow. If you talk about catastrophic, it is basically something like fire, which lack of adequate storage or absence of CCTV camera or smoke alarms can actually lead to. Vandalism, which we saw here also in many other heritage buildings, if not checked, can lead to high risk to building as well as exhibits inside. You have the cumulative ones, which are like the structural cracks, which which may start at a very small level, and deterioration, which can be more weathering, because of weathering or because of many other reasons. These are cumulative ones, which over the years they can actually lead to a major disaster, and they also need to be addressed. Also, you have a lot of interventions which are done sometimes for different kind of services, like the one that you see here. This was actually done for the AC ducts, and then the work was incomplete, and which actually can lead to rodents, and which is a biggest one of the biggest issue for any kind of a museum. There are also some of these risks which are like dampness, which is a very slow risk, but it's a very slow hazard, but it can actually lead to a multiple risk over the time. And light, basically direct sunlight on paintings, they also need to be checked because they can be also one of those slow risks which happen over the time. When I come to galleries, we looked at the display systems, which have there is an issue with the structural stability, considering the fact that, as I already mentioned, Chandigarh is prone to earthquake. And so even though we have not had many major problem over the years, I think there was only one sculpture which was damaged in the 1970s, but it definitely needs a relook at. Considering that with the climate change, we have a lot of these natural hazards also multiplying over the years. Water ingress and accumulation in most of the openings during the rainfall. This actually creates a major dampness on the structure outside, inside. So you can already see here, in both the pictures, that there is a lot of these dampness from the rain which actually comes in and which gets stagnant here. There is also, the museum is very interesting with the kind of clear story light that it actually has, considering the architecture, the design it has taken up. And but because of these clear story also, sometimes because of the positioning or because of the lack of blinds, as you can see on the very extreme picture, there can be a problem of light as well as even water leakage also coming from these clear story. This was the mapping of the ground and the first floor, which was done for water seepage, dampness, and stains, and also cracks wherever they were seen. So each the entire building was looked at in centimeter by centimeter and separately. Discoloration at the level of false ceiling and concrete also needs to be investigated. So as of now, this assessment was mainly done on the physical understanding of this place, observations, but they need to also, the concrete needs to be thoroughly investigated within also. As I mentioned, sunlight is a very important hazard, which over the time it can actually lead to major disaster as far as risk to the paintings are concerned. So there are these paintings which are on the ramp, somewhere on the ramp, on other places also where the light comes in from the clay story, and they can actually damage the paintings if they're exposed to it for a long time. Miniature, there is also an issue of displays, shells. Like when you talk about miniature paintings, like I mentioned, this museum has a wonderful collection for the same. It is very important that they have to be, cased in correctly, because as of now, what has happened is that they are actually cased in with they are put on bigger panel with thumb pins and put in a casing, but this casing can be a big problem for collecting environmental pollution and dust. So that needs to be actually looked at. I already talked about the prints and the exposition to the sunlight. Now the thing is that, as I mentioned, that this the interesting part of this architecture is also the clerestory the windows and the light that it generates. But what has happened is that over the years, instead of the translucent translucent glass that was there originally, that has been converted into plain glass. And this plain glass actually then, gives a different kind of a light, and it gives a more direct light compared to what was originally planned. So that also needs to be looked at. Vandalism, as Dr. Purohit already talked about, vandalism is one very major issue that most of the museum actually face. And considering that we have a simple this kind of a railing, there have been issues with the vandalism that have been seen here. Also, another thing which was pointed out by the curator was about people taking selfies with the paintings. So most of the time when they try to take selfies, they actually try to come much closer to the paintings, and that can also be an issue with that. As far as the fire is concerned, which was the second major risk that we looked at here, there are existing systems. They've got 50 fire extinguishers of type A, 1 fire extinguisher of type B on both the floors. But the issue which was identified was basically some of the extinguishers are just left around. They are not in use, and I think most of the people don't even know that they are there. I'm talking about the maintenance people. Also, the location of the extinguisher is very important. If you look at the second picture, the location of extinguisher is just after the, in a corner, just after the artifact. So in the emergency situation, when you want to use it, you want to access it, it might be difficult to access it, or secondly, it can be accessed, but it can also put the artifacts which are in the front at risk because of the way, the people have to move at that time. Also, on the third picture, if you see, there's an extinguisher which is just behind the artifact, which even we saw it because we went around that entire place. So there are many of these extinguishers which are actually hidden from view because of course, we also want the aesthetic part of this entire situation. But at the same time, it also needs to be very functional and straightforward, because fire is one thing where it is always against time that you actually working with as far as risk is concerned. Also, you had the sand buckets which were lying some unmaintained in some areas, and you also need to check on the date. So though most of the fire extinguishers were, according to the, they have been upgraded over the time, but there were some which were left as it is. You also have this bucket, which is actually now used as more of a garbage than as a sand bucket for fire. Also, we did do the exercise on looking at how many extinguishers are there, how many are working, and also the regular intervals that you need between the two extinguishers, which is also very, very important. And conduct of regular fire drills, because when we talk to the maintenance staff and the people who work in that area, most of them did not know how to operate this fire extinguisher. So that is very important. Important part is also the circulation, because that is one major hazard which happens when there is a stampede or when there is any problem with a risk which happens of how people also need to move. So if you look at the second plan, it actually shows that as of now there is only this one circulation which is shown in green, and this is the only way to go around. That is mainly because there are places like the ones which I have mentioned in red and the blue ones, and these places are the ones which were actually open, but they were closed because of the kind of display that they wanted to do, and so during the curating part and due to some maintenance, and also one of the staircases right in the entrance. So it was closed because of security purpose. But the issue is that even though it is good for the security, it can become problematic when it has to be used for emergency exits of the people also, as well as artifacts also. So there are two sides of this, and both needs to be actually addressed. Also, the 30-meter guideline is not applied here as of now.
Hi.
Your voice is not visible. Sorry, your voice is not good right now.
There are these things which are actually put up, which are. Hello? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you
Can
now.
you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so and then you also have these emergency exits which have been actually closed and locked, as you already see, and then also have these coolers which are put right in front of the emergency exits. So they can be a challenge when it comes to evacuation routes. Pollution is one of a very, very important risk and a very slow cumulative and over the years. So because considering that this museum has a wide door, it's a very interesting pivot door, which was also designed by the architect, and but it also accumulates a lot of dust inside. And next to it, you have these jalis. Now, these jalis were actually put later on because there was a problem with the birds. So it was actually put in to avoid the birds coming in. But this has actually been the source of accumulation of a lot of dust. Also, you have artifacts like this, which are placed at a very high level, which can actually be a little problem during cleaning because this is actually on the ramp and it accumulates dust over the years. The existing security system, which was also monitored, because there is a existing security system which is there. There are n number of cameras which are already there in place. But the issue is because of because of the placement of the cameras or because some of them are not working, they are leading to unmonitored vandalism and can lead to accidental damage also by the visitors. So if you see these blue spots which I have marked on the plan, they are all the places which are actually unmonitored. And as I mentioned, the reason can be because of the placement of the cameras, the way it functions. So they were also identified. There are many of them at the back side, and it's a huge area which will go unmonitored over the years. In the entrance, what has happened is they put the lockers have been put in a room just across. So because of that, you find most of the visitors, they are leaving their bottle, their backpack, everything just on the reception counter. And there are no metal detectors or security system, technical security, even though there is a mandate that the visitors are not allowed to take anything inside the museums, but there is a possibility of anything just skipping past. Of museums are one of the the important one of the valuable assets, the most important valuable assets of the museum, because they and they are actually kept at a certain temperature, at the temperature of humidity control also. But the issue that we found in this government museum was basically that 80% of the storage area was actually taken up by the furniture and the equipment, which actually leads to a lot of the artifacts or the paintings which are left on the floor. And ideally, it should be 40%. And universal standards actually talk about that any or every object can be identified and accessed within 3 minutes without moving more than one object. This is for the storage purposes. And this is very when we have any kind of a risk for floods or for other things, this can actually be a big problem with the paintings and artifacts on the floor. Also, there was absence of CCTV camera. There is no smoke detector. Also, the location of the storage is away from the museum, and it is just at the back side of it. But we did find 3 ways of storage. One was these wooden boxes which were used earlier and they are still in use, and new systems and steel, and which are much better for storage of any kind of artifact of typology. But there is an issue with how these long fabrics have been stored, because they need to be actually stored in a roller system. But as of now, they have been like just put into foldable things and put into these cupboards that you can see now. Can you hear me? I hope so.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So, and as I already mentioned, there was an incomplete construction work and unused ducts, which can lead to rodents. You also have leakage in the entrance due to the AC systems on the terrace. There's a dampness in the rear walls. There's cracks in the front walls. This is the access to the storage, and here you can actually see one extinguisher which is totally hidden from view, and So when necessary, it might not be possible to use it. Even on the CCTV camera, you actually can't see much in the storage area. As I mentioned, that it is away from the gallery, and it is not there is nobody in the daytime or otherwise being placed there. It can be at major risk. As I mentioned, there are already 56 cameras which are located, 16 outside the building, only 25 were in the working condition. Unobstructed space is required for proper viewing, and also the screen size is very small. So that could be a big problem of how people can, the operators can actually see them. And considering the room size, large amount of heat is generated, and so it becomes a very inhabitable space for the operator. He or she would need to get out of the room now and then. Also, the existing systems need to be relooked into with the technological advancements that has happened over the time, and they need to be updated regularly. Though the front area is monitored and by 3 ITVP people, the back area has only 1 guard from the agency. And earlier, officially, there are supposed to be many on the number, but what we found were these people. And also the CCTV, there is a lack of CCTV cameras on the backside. The staff is not trained for reacting during the emergency, and these back areas are not even accessible to fire engines because of all this greenery that has been developed there. So that also needs to be looked at. No fire hydrants were seen in the surroundings, considering the importance of the building and the value of the collections. Absence of clearance area around the building. So if you have a fire engine which is coming in, it cannot actually go around the entire building. It has a lot of these greenery and other things which are in between. Also a lot of storage which has happened outside. Considering the building, there was also a survey done on this the structural issues. So you have this issue of a lot of water seepage. You have the vandalism, which is also on the in the front, the columns which are in the front. You have water which is actually getting accumulated in these channels. So these water channels are one of the very interesting features of the building, and but over the time, it has also happened that the water is actually accumulating at this place, and this can lead to the seepage going inside. Some more example, then there is also an issue of discoloration, and then you have these new bricks and the old bricks which actually do not match. Also the discoloration of the concrete and seepage. Also, there are many which are also lying outside the museum within the premises. But these sculptures are directly, they are exposed to direct environmental scenario, and they lead to delamination, deformation, and discoloration. And so that is something that needs to be looked at. If I put them all together, just as this thing, there are a lot of these different agents, where you talk about the dissociation, the light, temperature, humidity, people, dampness, who can, and there are these underlying causes also, which are like improper display, weathering, inappropriate locations, security, improper treatment, display issues, which can actually lead to, to risk. And also the hazards, which can be man-made hazard or which can be a natural hazard, and they can become more vulnerable. The area can be more vulnerable if you have these vulnerable factors, which are like the electrical lighting, electrical conduits, which we saw, across the buildings. You also have the maintenance issues. You have the biological factors, the plantations which has been done, which might have hampered the coming in of the fire engine. The presence of chemicals because of the work which is done in the labs, etc. So all these were looked at separately and in detail, and there was a kind of strategies which were put forward. So I'm just going to talk about 2-3 of them. One was majorly talking about the proposed evacuation routes, and when we talk about evacuation here, we were also talking about how we will also have to look at evacuating the artifacts also. This one actually looks at the people, where we try to compartmentalize them into different zones and open up the already existing possibilities which were there, the staircases which were there, the openings which were there, and there were these evacuation routes which were worked out. Also, there are two things which the emergency response team need to be very trained about is, of course, one is rescuing people, lives first, and second is also the salvaging of artifacts, of how we can do that. Because it's very important that the person who is actually the salvaging the artifact doesn't end into damaging it. So that is an important exercise which we will be doing in the next phase for training for the staff. Location of emergency services is also very important. Where is the fire station, where is the police station, general hospital, who will need to be called, and how far and what time they will take to actually get here. The emergency response team is very, very important, because it's very important to understand that when any hazard happens, then who is going to work in what capacity. So this team, which was formed because with the people who are already part of the museum, they are to be divided into basically rescue team, the building and infrastructure team, the administration and the supplies team, the object salvage team, and the communication teams. And these teams will have to, it can also be the same people who are working in different capacities at different point of time. But it's very important that they are identified beforehand, and this list is out there before the risk, before any hazard can actually happen. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank the organizer and Namita for giving me this opportunity for being able to share my experience with this museum. As I mentioned, that this is the water spout which I was talking about, and which is a beautiful feature of this, but it has actually become one of the biggest issue because of the water which is accumulating. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much for your informative and very detailed presentation, I must say. And I would like to call upon the next speaker. The next presentation is by Ms. Namita Jaspal. She's the Director and Senior Conservator at HPA, Heritage Preservation Atelier. She is a heritage conservator working in the field for the last 2 decades. Some of her extremely important works include the conservation of the 400-year-old dress of our 6th Guru, Guru Har Gobind Singh Ji. She has recently worked on a quilted Angrakha of Banda Bahadur Singh Ji. She has led the conservation work at the wall paintings of Darbar Sahib of Harmandir Sahib Ji, Golden Temple, from 2013 to 2017. She has been instrumental in creating display cases with microenvironment control for preservation. Under her guidance, HPA has set up a museum at Solan, Himachal Pradesh, with all display cases having microenvironment control to preserve the objects on display for posterity. So over to you, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
And is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, put it on full screen.
Yes, I'm doing that. So, as our topic is regarding the risk reduction in the museums, and we have had real nice talks from Dr. Rajesh Purohit, Dr. Banani Bhattacharya, and Niyati Jigyasu. It was really enriching till now, and I hope I can add a few things in my presentation. And it would basically be more on museums, though I'll start with a general thing. In the biosphere on Earth, wherever there is life and its tangibles created by the life, there are hazards also. And whenever whenever life interacts with a hazard, a disaster is created and it causes some damage. But if we can add to this whole scenario a proper plan of preservation, resilience, and mitigation, maybe we can have a better recovery from a disaster. And as we all know, and we have just discussed, there are natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and wildfires. There are man-caused hazards also. And the main ones are deferred maintenance and negligence. As we saw in Niyati's presentation, the things were kept in place, but just for the namesake. There was no sand in the sand bucket, and even the fire extinguishers were outdated, many of them. So a deferred maintenance is the major cause in most of the human disasters, and the negligence again. After this, to some extent, theft, vandalism, wars, and accidents are also the causes. Now, I'll start my presentation with the two examples. And the first example, you can call it's from a myth or a story or maybe a actual history. And the second one is from the current time. And that is again taken randomly just in our neighbor country, a disaster that happened a few years back. So first example is of Dwarka, Krishna's Dwarka, the disaster resilience that was created, a city that was created with this thing in mind that it is prone to natural disaster, being engulfed by the sea. It is at the tip of the sea. And still, it recovered 7 times. It was destroyed by sea 7 times, and it recovered all those times until when Sri Krishna was no more. After that, and it is again said, it is on record that if we believe in our scriptures and the story that the oral tradition that has told us, that it was destroyed ultimately just by the community's decline into decadence and infightings. So when the community becomes, you can say its behavior or attitude is below standards and they are infighting. So their focus is not on future and resilience and all. So then it is bound to get destroyed. But it was 7 times that it came back after destruction, after encountering the disaster. The second example is of Bhutan. Here, this historical building was right now, this picture is from before fire, before this disaster happened. And it was destroyed by fire, and in 2012, I think. And the most important thing that we need to learn from here is that it was destroyed because of some discrepancies in our planning and putting those plans into action. Like this is made of wood, and initially it was made, there was no electricity when it was made, when it was constructed. But later on, with time, things were changing and electricity was a basic, you can say, necessity, and the wiring was done and all. And the fire is supposed to be because of short circuit. So there was a discrepancy which caused this huge loss to the nation. But still, there were certain things which were working. The good governance, the head of the king and queen were on the scene, directly overseeing the whole process and giving instructions. And secondly, the involvement of the armed forces of Bhutan. So they were knowledgeable, they were organized, and there was no one killed in this blaze. And most of the relics which were much older than this building itself. This building would be, I think, 16th, 17th century constructed, and the relics that were saved, thousands of them were from 6th to 7th century AD. So they could save them through their presence of mind and organized behavior, organized action, I should say. And how they save the water sensitive things, they would put them in the metal boxes and throw them out rather than just soaking them with water. They were they knew enough, knowledgeable enough, and understanding enough to put them in metal boxes and then throw them out so that they won't catch fire or get damaged by water. And now we have a body like UNESCO, and we have a disaster risk reduction plan for various spheres, and I won't go into this thing. This particular slide, I would like to mention that, as Anidya also has talked about the circle, the preparation part and the response part. So mitigation, preparation, and response and recovery. So this is a cycle. But there's another thing, very interesting thing about this, that instead of a cycle, nowadays we call it a spiral. Because the disaster risk reduction has 4 phases. The disaster risk seeks to make improvements over time. So it has 4 phases, and once it is recovered, it is not just recovered, it will learn lessons from this experience. So there would be an improvement. So it won't fall back in the same circle. So it will make improvements over time to build back better, or you can say bounce forward. So rather than bounce back after a disaster. So disaster risk reduction follows a spiral shaped path rather than a circular one. And of course, what will work for a proper disaster risk reduction plan would be right from the beginning. Like the policies, DRR policies and plans should be in place in details. The structure of building. Many museums are set up in old buildings, historical buildings, but many of them are newly constructed. They are made after a proper designing and plan. And at that level, if we consider all the risk factors also, it should be great. Then the gallery design. We have seen in various museums, even of national level in our country, that the gallery is designed like display cases are put the way they are supposed to be aesthetically appealing, or in a different kind of maybe fashion to show timeline or something. And in that process, we sometimes, rather many times, forget that this may not be good for in case of any hazard happening or disaster happening, how people would move out, how would they be able to find their way if it is not given, if the arrows are not there. So the gallery design is again the stage where we can consider the disaster risk management. Then storage plan, display design, and museum staff. These are the 3 basic things that would be working all the time after the museum has been established or constructed. And in this presentation, I would mainly focus on the storage plan and the display design, though I wanted about museum staff, but because of shortage of time, I'll just talk about storage plan and the display design. Now, these are pictures from some museums in India. This is one better equipped museum. This is a little modern museum and has more facilities in storage. And they are properly organized. But again, on the right picture, you can see that there's still lack of space. Though many paintings are there on this sliding racks, but there are many which are just lying on the floor. This is another example, though this museum, the sculptures are just lying like that, and some of them may be very important, invaluable, and can be displayed, and they can tell stories about their time. And some maybe the organic material is kept in a Godrej almirah, very old almirah, which is getting rusted and all. And this particular museum, I think it has recently got a new storage area, and I hope it would be better. So this was the state of our museums, and what we should be doing is what I'm showing in the next slides. I'll be considering the major natural disasters like earthquake, because many of our museums are on the seismic belt, and floods and fire, mainly fire and earthquake. So all these smaller objects and fragile objects should be properly cushioned. And whatever material we are using to support them, to cushion them, should be very soft and cushiony. It should not be hard. Otherwise, by the law of physics, the softer thing would get damaged first. So around it should be all softer material, the cushioning material. And they should be very well securely kept in these acid-free or archival boxes or racks. And these racks on the bottom right picture, you can see the drawers. They are secured in the boxes, but still they are kept in the drawers. And even these drawers are then closed with the doors. So that is very important, so that in a seismic activity, the door protects and the drawers are not coming out. And the research has gone much beyond these simple techniques. This is a picture from the Getty Villa. And even in the construction, we can have these systems in anchoring systems in the walls and the floors. Not everyone visiting the villa would see that or can imagine that these walls, plain looking walls, have these intricate systems behind to hold the display cases and the storage cabinets. And as far as the fire protection is concerned, I would like to mention a few things, that some of the fire myths, that if the building is made with a non-combustible material, it is fire safe. It is not so, because it is housing so much of other material which would be combustible. It is not everything inside the building is fire safe. So this is a big myth. And many of the organizations, they think that they'll be fine because the fire department is next door. This is again a myth, because why the fire should come up in the first place? And strong fire prevention programs are enough. No, they are not enough if everything is unless and until everything is in place, including each and every staff member being updated. And automatic sprinklers are just as damaging as the fire. No, it's not. It is the case in some things, some galleries. We'll see that the galleries of different materials should have different kinds of fire extinguishing systems. Even the storage area should have a different kind of fire extinguishing system. And we'll have in another of our talks, one of our colleagues explaining an experience where she found that most of the material was damaged because of the fire extinguisher lying there, not even being used, just lying there and certain gases are coming out continuously. It has its life. And those gases, maybe it seems harmless, like carbon dioxide. It can affect even the sculptures, even the metal sculptures, which are quite sturdy otherwise. Collection, storage, and fire prevention. And one thing is that collection storage rooms should be dedicated to for that purpose only, and avoid there should not be any other activity of packaging or conservation or processing happening over there, and no hot work operations should be done in that collections area, and the non-combustible shelving or containers should be there, which is not the case in our most of our museums. Closed cabinetry provides a great protection, just like the picture I showed you before. Even the drawer system, it has another cover of the doors. And nitrate films and other hazardous collections should be kept separately. This is another such well-designed cabinet, and it's showing two different kinds of storage systems, the normal shelves and the drawers. And again, so it has got all the safety features as far as theft is concerned, or fire is concerned, or even the flooding is concerned. And it is tested on all these measures. So it is the material and even the paint, including the finish, is fire protective. It is not affected by fire. It might be get affected by fire itself, but it won't let the fire go further. And another thing is that this is something very interesting, and this is, I think, we all can do. We just need that will to do. The decision-making bodies need the will to do is these curtains, the smoke and fire curtains. So they are of different types: vertical, horizontal, perimeter, and draft. And the elevator ones are also there. So these can at least limit the movement of fire beyond that particular area, or it can also prevent fire from coming in that area. So these are the preventive measures that we can have, but what if it happens? So managing the fire risk. Now, these are the measures which will take care of themselves. Once the fire is there, then we cannot do much about it, because our first priority, top priority, would be to protect people. Protect the building would come later, protect the collection will come later, and protect mission would come last. And the collection and the building need to be protected if we have the systems in place. And of course, people also, if the systems are in place, there won't be any problem, just like the example of Bhutan. So there was no casualty. So as mentioned by Niyati also, there are different classes. I won't go into all that, but it is very important because we have to understand, maybe in certain collection, class C is required because A and B cannot work. It is water sensitive. So because A class are basically water-based extinguishers, and so we cannot afford to have water over there. So, and we want class C, but we have to understand what is the working methodology of the class C, whether it is leaking slowly through its life cycle, and those gases are affecting the collection material. So these all these considerations have to be kept in mind. And biological damage can be prevented by keeping things in an oxic environment. I won't go into the details. We are doing these sort of things in some museums and collections. We can also have a visible storage area, which can act both as storage area and people can also see the things. and we should have all the data, which thing needs what in a CD or in a small device, which is accessible to the whole staff. Display. Now, this is a display in one of our museum, and for small displays, we are very casual. We just put a little backing, back support, and that's it. And this the objects can topple over at a slightest of vibration, which can happen not just because of earthquake or seismic activity. It can be because of certain other things also, loud sound or something. And we should have a proper display case designs for these things. And we have to check the center of gravity of the object. And scientifically, we can design. It is not a big thing. It just needs a little bit of will to do. So these are the total capture mounts for seismic mounts, we call them. One of them is used in this display. They are not visible. This is these are the bigger objects in the museum. This is in one of our museums. And if you see at the back of this sculpture, there are at 3 points, it's bolted, but the sculpture is hanging. There's no support at the bottom in this particular sculpture. So this can be damaging. So we need to have, it's not blindly just to hide what we are doing, the mounts. We are just doing it any way, and wherever we can just drill a hole, we have to be very accurate so that the balance is maintained and it doesn't topple off. So there are 2 types of passive and active. One is active and one is passive anti-seismic systems as far as display cases are concerned. In passive anti-seismic systems, the display cases they incorporate a braced frame anchored to the floor and ceiling. And this is a passive system. But active systems are more like there is no bolting to the ceiling and floor. I'll show you a picture. I'll show you a video if possible. This is the passive, this is the active. So the huge sculpture is bolted on a base, which is made of 3 frames. The lowest frame is bolted to the ground, and the other 2 frames are rolling on this base, and they are actually dissipating the force of the seismic activity. These springs are acting like brakes to reduce that force. So whenever there is a seismic activity, it is not that the sculpture, the separator layer, insulator layer under the sculpture will stop. But of course, the force is reduced. And this is developed by Getty and shared to the different museums. The information is shared, and we here have at HPA we have created for the first time in India, we are trying to create the whole museum with these points, considering all these points with the microenvironment control to save the artifact as such. It has got a little positive pressure, so no dust can enter from anywhere. Humidity is maintained, temperature is maintained. That are the conservation points. But also, if we add this factor, if we reduce the amount of oxygen, this can also be done in the same system. It can also prevent the fire, because fire requires oxygen. And if the percentage is reduced from 21, that is in normal air, to 14%, we can prevent fire to a large extent. And we can prevent the biological damage from insects, pests, so different types of display materials have different type of fire extinguishing systems. I won't go into the details because of shortage of time. These are different display cases we have created, which can prevent a lot of disaster. This is again one of them. And here, this is openable, another interesting thing. Because most of the display cases in India, you have to call a carpenter to open the beading, and they're not openable. So no matter what is the size of the display case, apart from sealing and the microenvironment control and oxygen, the reduced oxygen content, they are also openable. So that's all. Thank you. And thank you so much. I'll stop sharing the presentation now.
Thank you for this informative presentation. And our next paper would be jointly presented by Ms. Abira Bhattacharya, Curator, Assistant Curator, Department of Anthropology, National Museum, and Ms. Regie Sheba, Museum Education Officer, National Museum. Title of the paper is Rethinking Disaster Risk Management Strategy for Indigenous Collections in the Museums, a case study of the Anthropology Department of the National Museum, Delhi. So, over to you.
Please check, Vivek, if you can check that Abira is there in the panelists.
Yes, ma'am. She is in panelist.
Okay. Right.
Hello, ma'am. I'm there.
Okay, Abira, over to you, bache. Yeah.
Can I share my screen?
Vivek, you have to give Abira the sharing rights.
Ma'am, I have already given the sharing rights to her.
Ma'am, is my screen visible to you?
Yes, it's visible. Can you please put this in full screen mode?
Yes. Now is it visible?
Yes, it's perfect now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Namita ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to present this small case study, which is basically focusing on the anthropology department. Rige, my senior and my colleague, she's the museum education officer, and I'm the assistant curator in the Department of Anthropology. We both are working at National Museum currently. So we will be focusing on two different aspects. I like all our esteemed guests and all the speakers, they have talked about the architectural problems which are generally faced within the museum premises, the problems of storage, display, and also of the exit, entry, the other things. But then in this small presentation, we are going to talk about how the collection holders, they are managing their collection with respect to the disaster management program. So just to give you a brief about the anthropology department, in our department, we have approximately 9,480 objects of different nature. They are mostly composite, and they are also mostly organic in nature, because they are composed of animal skin, animal hair, goat skin, or it can be a basketry, it can be a wooden object. And our collection is divided into different time periods, which is a very common and generic feature seen in all the museums. But then we have special collections as well, depending on the area and the region. So we have Veril Elvin collection. Veril Elvin was a British anthropologist who collected different artifacts from the Northeast area, and also he conducted his tours and case studies in Bihar, Bengal, and Odisha. So our in the anthropology collection, we have more than 2,000 objects which are from the Northeast. And as we all are aware that Northeastern collection are mostly, they are organic in nature. Then we have Luthra collection. This is also mostly Northeastern, and BA's Guha is also Northeast. So the anthropology collection has a huge section which displays the Northeastern collection. And based on that, we also have a gallery which is dedicated to the indigenous art and lifestyle of the Northeast India. So the first thing which we do, like as a collection holder, how we are trying to enable this disaster management program. Since 2019, I would like to point out, like the National Museum started working on creating a draft for the disaster management plan, and it was based on the recommendations of National Disaster Management only, which was published in 2017. So we collaborated with INTAC for this. So the conservation people and also architects, they visited National Museum. They had a conversation with each and every collection holder, and then they also checked the plan of National Museum. The National Museum the building is created in 3 phases, and also like this gallery, this anthropology section is located in the 2nd floor of the building, and the gallery is like the reserve storage is adjacent to the gallery. So we have a huge reserve storage space which is divided into several subsections, and there are 2 galleries. One is a musical instrument gallery, and the other is a gallery dedicated to the tribal lifestyle of Northeast India. So based on the displays, based on the collection, as we all are aware, most of the collection, like 95% of the collection, is housed within the reserve section, and only very limited in our case, like around 8.6% of the objects of the total 9,500 are on display, and the rest is in the reserve storage. So when INTAC came, they prepared a detailed report, and then they also told us about the challenges, like how the glass showcases can cause problems in case of fire, in case of any kind of natural calamity. And also our exit and entry plan was difficult, because earlier in our gallery, there was only 1 exit and only 1 entry. So our gallery was connecting 3 more galleries. It started with the Northeast Gallery, then it proceeded towards the musical instrument gallery, and then there was another gallery on wooden artifacts. So 3 galleries was connected by only 1 exit, only 1 entry or exit plan. Then this was the suggestion of INTAC that there was another door, which was in 2019, it was closed, and they suggested that it should be opened. We should work on the display as well, and we should place sensors. The sensors were not there. Fire sensors were not there in the beginning, and therefore National Museum tried to employ all these ideas within the limited within the limited facilities which were provided within, like during that period, because pandemic, we were just stuck with the pandemic in 2020. So we started working on the disaster management plan which they created for us, and also the type of objects were recognized. As I said in the beginning, the material was mostly organic in nature. So as a part of this disaster management program, today Rigi and we are going to discuss 2 major themes. We are, as I would like to point out, like we are museologists and I'm an art historian as well. So we are not going to discuss the architectural configuration of the building, but we are going to talk about 2 different aspects, which is documentation, digital documentation, and another is sensitization. So Rigi is going to talk about the sensitization section, where she's going to talk about how children and how the CISF are going to be sensitized about disaster management program. And the factor which I'm going to talk about is documentation and digitization. So I think there is a problem. The pictures are not shown in this PPT. Can I just exit and enter again?
Sure, Abira, let me see if I can help you out.
I'm sharing you
with
the
this.
presentation again, because I think this is not visible in my screen. Just a second. I'm mailing you the PPT. Ma'am, I have mailed you the edited PPT just right now.
Okay, Abira, I'm just downloading it from your mail. And yes. So, Vivek, you have to give me the permission to share now.
कैमरा पे हाथ ठीक टर्न कर देना, हाथ ही रखना, फिर मेरे को देना. ये भी टर्न कर.
It's not yours, just a minute. Your presentation is not coming up. Maybe I have to enable the. Is this your presentation, Abira?
Yes, ma'am, this is my presentation.
Okay. So, I think I'll have to put it on slideshow from beginning like this.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, yes. Thank you so much. So, ma'am, we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
The next. Yes, so the previous
The
one.
earlier-
Yes, yes. So, ma'am, I was talking about the documentation and digitization. So earlier, the documentation was done on, like, till today, we have been following the classified accession register and the general accession register. There are two types of registers in the museum. This is a picture of the CAR. And then we also have these digital, not digital, I would say, these old photographic documentation in which the earlier curators, they have photographed the object and then they have created these booklets. So when we see it from a disaster management viewpoint, these are perishable items, and they are like sustaining them for a longer period can pose many problems. because as we all know, there is biodeterioration is also one of the hazards which is followed in all the museums, whether it is done by rodents or insects. So what the Ministry of Culture thought and what National Museum has been following is the Jatan virtual museum builder software. So we have been collaborated with CDAC Pune, and this is a digital collection management which is followed for all Indian museums, including 7 museums: Indian Museum Calcutta, National Museum, Salarjung, and also the ASI museums. So in this, we have a detailed representation of the object, about its description, about the dimension, the provenance, and also there is also one column in which we can put the conservation report as well. So there are various factors which can be included as a part of the Jatan Builder virtual museum. Ma'am, if we go to the next slide. So before doing the Jatan, before undertaking this procedure of putting the data within this software, these are the few procedures which we follow. As all the assistant curators, they follow a similar kind of procedure in which we do the conservation. The conservation treatment is done before the photography. So we have a whole procedure of physical verification in which conservation is also an integral part, and then we do a photo documentation. In certain cases, even 3D photography have been employed, where we have done photogrammetry of the objects. So this is in this photograph we can see we have a setup, like a dedicated setup in each of the department, where the objects from the collection, from the reserve collection, it's in the vicinity of the reserve collection only, where the objects are taken from the collection. They are physically verified. If little bit of conservation work is needed, like a surface cleaning work, then it is done in situ. If there are more traces of biodeterioration, then the objects are sent to the lab, and then the photography is done. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the whole platform of Jatan, in which there are 3 different levels, and the 4th level is the National Portal and Digital Repository of Museums of India, which is meant for the public. So we begin with the operator level, in which it is a basic level where we just put the data, like the basic data, the photograph, the title of the object, the dimension, and other details are uploaded at this portal. Then the curator level is the level where the descriptions are written by the curator, by the concerned curator. And if some research has been done, it is also put, if the curator wants to put a bibliography, if one of the object has been published somewhere, then you can also put a bibliographic detail to it. You can even put a conservation report in this curator level. Then it goes to the director level, which is handled by the director of collection or by the DGNM. And then from after the approval of the data, the content, the file is sent to CDAC, and then CDAC approves the data and put it on a national portal of digital repository. So this national portal of digital repository is visible to everybody. So now the data, the content, which is also in the reserve collection, is made visible to the public. So a person sitting anywhere in the world can see the collection, what National Museum consists of. And then this is a very useful tool to maintain even the conservation records. Like we can see the data, like if we are facing any kind of biohazard or any kind of natural calamity as well. So we have a permanent database in which we can refer to the before and after pictures of the photograph of the object. So this is how the national, if we go to the next slide. So this is how the portal for the public looks like, where we click on the museum, then we click on the department. We can also do a search through the object, and then we can get a little bit of information on this. If we want to, like as a researcher, if you want to take a photograph, you can, like our National Museum has a whole division, the education division, where Vijay is going to talk about. So you can also request a photo of this object, because the other details like the accession number, the title has been already given in this portal. If we go to the next slide. So this is this is the operator level, and that was the interface meant for the public. So this is the internal level where the Jatan has a record number apart from the accession number of the museum. If we go to the next slide. So this, like, now going to the storage, because storage is also an important part when we talk about the museum collections. So earlier we all the speakers, they have discussed the problems of the storage, and earlier this is how our storage used to look like. It was all in a very disheveled like in a disheveled state, and everything was just falling off, and they were just they were wrapped in plastic, or they were wrapped in like in brown sheets. And then what we did, we have segregated the storage according to the material. We have segregated the musical instrument. We have dedicated one section for the musical instrument. We have also the fire alarm. We have put a proper air conditioning system dedicated to the nature of the object, where the temperature can be controlled. And this has also helped us to stop the procedure of biodeterioration. So apart from the structural issues which are faced during any kind of natural calamity, even the internal issues like a biohazard, biodeterioration is one of the important factors where we need to employ the disaster management plan. If we go to the next slide. Ma'am, if yes, so this is this is the new storage where we have bought these almiras. I completely agree that these storage almiras are not fire resistant. We have been we are in a procedure of purchasing fire resistant Godrej almiras, but just to clear the area, like if you see the earlier picture, they were just racks. Everything was open. So now everything is cleaned. Everything is like, this was the place where in the earlier picture, ma'am, in the earlier picture, yes. So on your right, or on your, no, this one. So on your left, if you see all these racks, the racks were all open. Everything was just falling apart. And if you see the next picture, the next one. So now everything is organized. We have wrapped them within either in archival paper, or sometimes even in plastic, because that we were trying to make a judicious use of the existing material. But definitely it takes, like we all are aware, that it takes a lot of time to purchase new things, to new materials. But still, within our limited facilities, we have tried to do a storage reorg. Now at least we can trace the objects easily according to their geographic location, and also according to their nature. If we go to the next slide, conservation treatment is definitely an important part of this whole maintaining the storage, and also in digital documentation. So as I have been emphasizing on biohazard, this is a before and after picture of a Ladakhi perak, where you can see these objects, although they were packed within the archival paper, and then they were put in such Godrej storage areas. But this happened when there was COVID. So during the pandemic time period, when the ACs were not working, when according to the norms, the ACs were switched off, and there was no air circulation within the storage area, and then we were also not visiting the museum every day. So this happened in 2020, when everything was shut, and then we were visiting the museum only when it was required. So biodeterioration can also happen, and this is one of the major hazards which every museum faces. So the conservation department has done a wonderful job in restoring this object, and it took them for almost 6 to 8 months to restore the object in its original position. If we go to the next slide, these are the gallery views. So now this is the new gallery. I will show you the earlier gallery, in which in this picture, you can see there are jackets. There are on one showcase, there are jackets which are hung on the roller. Earlier, the jackets were just pinned, like they were iron nail was used to put the jacket. So and then the whole display has been changed. So this was done during the pandemic time period when everything was shut. Then from July 2020 onwards, we started coming to the museum based on a roster, and we started working because in 2019, INTAC gave us a plan, in a disaster management plan, which we were trying to employ. So you can see one exit, one entry door here, and I'm going to show you another exit. So what we did, we reconceptualized the whole plan. We changed, we opened the second door as well. So now at the present, there are 2 doors which are functional within this gallery. So if you go to the next slide, like you can see if you see there is a pole in the center, you can see a totem pole just at the back. So the totem pole was earlier on the second door of the gallery. It was placed on the second door, and the second door was entirely shut. So as I said, it during the evacuation, if something happens, evacuation could have been hindered because only one door was open. So that was our whole idea, that both the doors of the gallery should be opened, and we should employ, we should monitor the light. The light has been monitored within the gallery. We should employ those techniques which can at least slow the process of biodeterioration. If we go to the next slide. So these are the type of objects I have been talking about, all organic in nature. If you go to the next slide. So this is the totem pole. The totem pole, as I said, it was earlier on the exit door. Now it has been moved within the gallery premises, it has been contextualized within a new narrative. And then if we go to the next slide. So now this is the entrance of the museum, or of this gallery, and you can see at the corner, at the end, there is another gallery, which is the musical instrument gallery. If we go to the next slide. So we have also created a mandala, we have tried, in this showcase, you can see the variety of objects. There is wood, there is also bone ornaments, there are copper ornaments, there are clay. So you can see the kind of challenges which we have been facing. We are trying to put new dehumidifiers as well, which are fixed on the showcases, and the showcase temperature can be controlled at the same time. So we are still in the process of doing several more, adding more activities within these existing displays. But this is a new display which this entire gallery was revamped, and it was redone and it was inaugurated in November 2021. If we go to the next slide. So these are the gallery views. If we go to the next slide. So this is the exit point. On this side, on the other side, there is a door. So now, as I said, there is one entry and one exit point given to the gallery. If we go to the next slide. And then we also have this, next slide, we also have this archival collage, archival photograph collage, which you can do a comparison of how these objects were worn, how they were used by the users. And then we also have, also employed QR code, so people can get more information about these objects. If we go to the next slide. So these are the variety of showcases, new showcases, which are employed by the national museums, and also within on the wall, you can see there are small activities which have been done by the anthropology and the education department. Small activities have been employed as well. If you go to the next slide. So this is the old view, in which you can see the old view. On the very first showcase, they were very old armatures, and this old view is not that old. It was in 2017. So this was how the gallery used to look like in 2017 and 18, where these armature based mannequins, they were only cotton pushed in inside them, and based on the cotton wrapping, the textiles were wrapped, and then they were not the display was not only faulty, but also there was problem with the contextualization as well. So this is how these are small steps which I can say from a curator's point of view, which we could have employed. If we go to the next slide. So you can see a lot of these old mannequins which were causing damage to the objects. If we go to the next slide again. So this was the oldest, like it may be 1989. So you can see like in this new gallery, we haven't changed the showcases because the showcases are permanent, and dismantling any showcase means like dismantling the whole gallery. We didn't want to close the gallery and make it like close it for a year and then reopen it for the public. But what we did, we were trying to utilize the existing showcases. We changed the light. Then now the lights are all now the lux is controlled. We changed the display, and also we try to employ a better methodology which can hinder the process of biodeterioration. If we go to the next slide. Now this is the Hop-on app which we have been using, and these are like you can see the entry exit door. So at on this door the totem pole was placed. So the totem pole was covering this entire door, and there was only one exit or entry, which I have been talking about since the beginning. So if we go to the next slide. So these are the small activity sheets which are there. If we go to the next slide then. So, ma'am, I think this is not the right presentation. I have sent you another presentation in which Rige is going to talk about the visitor profile. I have sent you another presentation right away.
Okay, just let me check.
Yes, yes.
Is it this one?
No, not that one, ma'am. Can you proceed?
This is what I got from you in the mail an hour back.
So there will be a slide on visitor profile.
Okay, I'll just see is it something like this?
No, not
These?
this.
No, not these.
No, not this.
Okay.
पूछो दोबारा mail करेंगे. Maybe Abira will email it to you once again. Would that be fine?
Okay. Okay.
आप अपना वो करो, close कर दी. Ma'am, Abira must have emailed it to you once again. If you could just check that. No, the is not going. there is a slide on visitor profile. Maybe I could start from that. Yeah. Above, it should be slide number. इसके ऊपर ऊपर Can you go up, please, ma'am? This is slide number 25. Yeah. May I start?
Yeah, sure, Reba, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. Sorry for the glitch. I'm Rige, and like Abhiram has introduced in the beginning itself, I head the education department at National Museum, New Delhi. So good afternoon to all. I'm not very sure whether I qualify to speak on disaster management, but I thought might as well take this opportunity with open arms and speak about museum education and how museum education can contribute in sensitizing our visitors. And of course, the museum fraternity as well as museum staff working at National Museum in regard to disaster management. Because normally the concept about museum education is that it is only to do with art and craft sessions. But I think this is one platform or a medium which could also act as one of the contributors in talking about disaster management to the general public. So before I proceed, I think it is must for us to talk about the general visitor profile of National Museum. As you can see on the screen, we have a diverse footfall visiting the National Museum, and I'm sure ye baaki presence maybe yahi hoga. But our visitor profile consists of, as you can see, subject specialist, tourist and pilgrims, art enthusiasts, school groups, teachers and families. The reason why I have used a bigger font for school groups is that because we generally look at school groups as our first target audience to talk about disaster management from a museum point of view. Can we go to the next slide, please? This I wouldn't be talking much about because Abira has already spoken about it. And like she said, we would be focusing on, unlike other presentations, we would be focusing on digitization and human sensitization as part of disaster management policy that we follow at the National Museum, and how human sensitization is must, especially when it comes to visitors visiting the National Museum. Next slide, please, ma'am. Yes, like everybody who have joined this seminar or workshop, we are aware that there are different threats that can cause deterioration or anything to do with, museum objects that's on display. Now that we are talking about the indigenous collection that we have at National Museum, which is under in the custody of Anthropology Department. So how do we reach out to more people? How do we make our collection accessible? And how do we amplify these indigenous voices? So we collaborated with the Anthropology Department, and where we thought that, if there is a disaster caused due to, say, rodents or anything, because we have a mix of organic and inorganic collection, how do we safeguard that? How do we preserve the indigenous voices? So this was a very, very simple yet effective initiative that we started at the National Museum, which is called We the Community series, where we connected with community persons from different parts of the country. Because we have a huge Warrior Elvin collection, we thought why not start with Warrior Elvin collection, where we connect with community volunteers. They help us select objects of great importance to their community, because हमारे पास इतने सारे objects हैं, and it is difficult for a curator, since we don't belong to that community, then maybe we are biased towards an object from artistic point of view, but it might be very different for a community. So keeping the disaster management and human sensitization in focus, we connected with community persons, where we invited them to select objects from the digitized portal, which is the Jatan portal, and we asked them to look at objects which is important to their community, because we are talking about living culture. So they selected objects, they recorded the context, they actually, in the museum, we tend to decontextualize the objects which are on display. So they recontextualized it for the National Museum. We had it recorded. And also, I would like to emphasize, as Abira has been doing, that these things were happening during COVID times. So, there was no amenity for us to travel. So we asked our volunteers to use their mobile phones, go to the villages, or start from their family itself, record something, but with reference to what they see on a digital portal. They did that and they sent it through WhatsApp. We edited it here at the National Museum, and then we have it in the public domain right now. So the idea about this initiative is that something which faces a threat due to different causes, it could be rodents or fungus, anything, how do we preserve them with the help of community, with the focus to amplify indigenous voices. So this was one initiative. I don't know whether this qualifies as one of the mediums that would help museums to safeguard their indigenous collection, keeping the disaster management policy in mind. But we think as a museum fraternity and as museum educators that this could be one of the contributors in shaping the disaster management policy, keeping visitors, indigenous communities in focus. Can we go to the next, please? This is another example of We the Community series, where the community person is talking about beads and necklace, which also has wool element to it. So maybe we looked at the inorganic and organic aspect again. Could we go to the next one, please, ma'am? Yes. Now, when we talk of visitors, the reason why I wanted to speak about visitor and the visitor profile of National Museum is that generally, when we do activities in the museum, our aim is to talk about some art technique or the creator, but we don't look at it from a sensitization point of view. So this is something we have been, I joined National Museum in 2014. So even prior to that, there have been many workshops happening at the National Museum. But from 2020 onwards, we redid our entire museum education policy, where we focus that any activity that we do in the museum should have the aspect of awareness and talking about communities, design, pattern, and all that. But also there should be an orientation before we begin the workshop about human sensitization and also a little bit about disaster management. Now, when we talk about disaster management, the architecture is one of the integral aspect to it. So when we start our presentation, we take them to different stores, we take them to different areas and corners of the National Museum. We do object handling sessions and different interactive sessions, but we start with 2 slides. It's very basic. Hence I said, I don't know whether I qualify to speak on disaster management or not, but this is little initiatives that we take in the museum, that we sensitize our visitors, especially the young audience, and we brief them about where is the exit area, which is the entry point. If there is fire, which is the fire exit? How are you supposed to handle these objects? If there is some calamity, where do you put these objects? Which object should be in focus? So these are little things so that we take that opportunity to sensitize them at the very outset, maybe not in depth, but a little bit, so that if we reach out to one person, they go back and maybe they speak about it and they influence 2-3 more. So focusing on our visitor profile, we also focus on the fact that our visitors should be our volunteers and should become our ambassadors and reach out to more when they do outreach, when they go out of the museum premise. Can we go to the next slide, please? Again, the next category of people working at the National Museum who can help us in creating human sensitization or awareness about digital disaster management at National Museum from a visitor point of view is the CISF. So normally what happens is that there is always new people getting inducted in the CISF program. So either they serve at the airport or some other museums or some government organization. So when they come to the museum, the very first thing what they have to do is they get deputed in some galleries. They are not sensitized about what is a museum, what is an object, what is the relevance of an object to the community, or how important is it to the museum and museum fraternity. So this year we started a program where we have been doing sensitization program, but this was a little different because here we have used the medium of theater, where we encourage our CISF personnel to become visitors and look at the gallery, look at the collection from a visitor point of view, give their inputs, and incorporate that in the disaster management policy, which the CISF prepares. So generally, they focus on, so we sensitize them about what is a museum, which is the oldest museum in India. And yes.
Excuse me, Rike, can you just wrap up?
Yes,
Because
yes,
it's
I will.
already 1 hour.
Yes. So
Okay,
can we go to the next slide? Yeah, again, so it's the same, where they act as visitors and they're taken around. Next slide, please. This is one of the handling sessions that we do in the museum. So these handling sessions are not mere handling sessions where kids are brought to the store and told about how to handle an object, but they do become our eyes and ears. If there is some calamity that hits the National Museum, where are they supposed to keep these objects, whatever they're handling right now, which rack are they supposed to go to and place these objects. So these are little sensitization activities that we do in the museum with access to our store areas and handling our actual objects in the National Museum. The next slide, please. So just to conclude, because we don't have time, like it is said that, any publicity is a good publicity. Our motto here at the museum is that any contribution is a big contribution. So we encourage all our visitors to contribute to this and become our eyes and ears during any calamity and help preserve our tangible, intangible heritage that we have in the National Museum. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, ma'am. So I would like to conclude this. And for the final vote of thanks, I would like to thank the patron, Shri Taj Hassan, IPS Executive Director at NIDM, and our convener, Professor Santosh Kumar, Head at GIDRR Division, NIDM, Government of India. I would also like to thank all the speakers, Mr. Rajesh Purohit, Dr. Banani Bhattacharya, Ms. Neeti Jigyasu, Ms. Namita Dispal, Ms. Abira Bhattacharya, and Ms. Sheba. Thanks are due to the coordinators as well, Mr. Ali Heather and Mr. Vivek Sharma. And thank you to all the participants for showing your interest. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, NIDM, and all the participants and speakers.